My name is Andy Rollins. I'm a county extension agent in South Carolina, covering multiple counties with peach production, as well as other small fruit and vegetable commercial production. So appreciate everybody being here. Now we're to the speaker slide. So Guido Schnabel helped set up all of the talks and everything this year. So I'm going to turn it over to him and let him take it from here.
Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. The topics of the conference was determined by grower input. We have 3 focus areas this morning and this afternoon, and then another 3 tomorrow. So today we're going to focus on pests and on bacterial canker and bacterial spot and on labor. So those are the focus areas today. And I changed it up a little bit this year. I left some time for you to interact with the speakers. That way you can ask specific farm questions that might be of interest to you. And the speakers will be around to hopefully answer those questions. So that's what I have under roundtable discussions. Basically, there's going to be a roundtable pest management session right after the pest talks, and then a roundtable bacteria management session right after the bacteria talks. So you're welcome to interact with the speakers, and I hope that this will result in some lively discussions. With no further ado, I think I'm going to introduce the first speaker. That's Brett Blau. Brett Blau is at UGA and actually has an affiliation with Clemson University as well, and he's going to give our first talk on pest management.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you all for coming here during the cold. I must admit that I just got back from Michigan, and I apologize for bringing the cold back down here with me. But I know with the crop, it should be good. But for us being in Savannah, not so much. But it'll be a great meeting. We're stuck indoors, so we might as well enjoy. Today, I'll be talking about our current management options for San Jose scale. I've talked a lot about San Jose scale over the years, and so today I'm kind of condensing all the information I have done over the past about 6-7 years into one presentation. So I got a lot to cover, and hopefully you'll learn something new. But before we get into scale, if I can actually move this, we're going to do a little bit about chlorpyrifos update. Just probably all know back in 2022, EPA said, nope, we're done with chlorpyrifos, revoked all the tolerances. Thankfully, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals came back and said, EPA, you kind of rushed that a little bit. Let's pull it back the reins and said, okay, the tolerances are back on. And the EPA said, okay, we'll agree with that, but with only chlorpyrifos products that currently have a registered label. So things like Lorsban 4E, they took away their label, and so that label currently does not exist. So with the EPA's new ruling, it is also not legal to use. But we're still in the same point. Just last month, the EPA proposed a new ruling saying they're going to revoke all the food tolerances of chlorpyrifos again. But this time there's going to be an exception of 11 food crops. And thankfully on that list, if you can see in the back here, we have apple, peach, and strawberry. There's a variety of other things on there, but I know that apples and peaches and strawberries are common crops we grow here. So that's a good thing right now. We still have chlorpyrifos. But basically what that means again is that things that have already lost their label are still not legal to use, so that Lorsban 4E is gone, but we do have other options. Some of those options are the Drexel products and the Loveland products. All right, so make sure that that label is current and still registered, and then it's legal to use. All right, so these are just some of our options here. And then just the last little bit is that chlorpyrifos is still under review, and so all this can change. But for this current season right now, we're still good to use chlorpyrifos. All right, so that's the big takeaway. We're good. But we'll keep you updated if anything changes. All right, so San Jose scale, one of our key pests that we do use chlorpyrifos. What are we currently using to manage it? What are our options? The first thing, I just always like to introduce this pest because it is a nasty little guy, and a lot of our insects, some of these products like chlorpyrifos kill so many different things, and why does it struggle to kill San Jose scale? And the big thing is that they live under these protective coverings, a little waxy layer that produces a really nice barrier for a lot of our insecticides. If you peel away that little waxy layer, we've got our female here. She's a nice plump little blob. Pretty much all she does is sit there on the tree, putting her proboscis into the plant and sucking out the juices. All right, and so she lives a really happy life under her little waxy layer. The males are mobile. They have wings. They live most of their life under that waxy layer as well, but when they mature into adults, they are free living. They can fly around, find those females, and mate and produce those offspring. The big problem here is that those females can produce over 200 offspring, so each female has 200 babies. Those 200 babies, all those females will go off. They will also reproduce and have more babies. And so with 3 to 4 generations a year, one single female can then become over 1 million new San Jose scale, right? So one female on that tree can become a big problem by the end of the season. So that protective covering and that reproductive rate makes these a very, very troubling pest to manage. The immatures are those crawlers, so these little, also little blobs, but they're mobile as well. They have little legs, they'll move around, and then they'll find a nice place to settle down. Again, insert their proboscis into that plant and start drinking, and eventually they'll produce that waxy layer and then live a happy life. All right, and then that's where we come in and say, all right, so doing all that feeding, what's going on? The biggest issue is that they can cause the leaf chlorosis and actually eventually cause death to trees. We first see limb death, and then eventually, if untreated, those trees will die. Probably not necessarily directly due to the San Jose scale, but it severely weakens those trees, allowing other things to come in and kill the tree. But we also, if the populations get high enough, those crawlers will move to the fruit, lay down, and you get those little white spots here. Those are the white caps. Their feeding causes those red spots. I know some people have been able to market those as Dalmatian peaches. That's really clever. It really does not impact the flavor of the peach. However, that tree death, that's a big issue, right? All right, so what can we do? All right, we have several options. Our current management options, we have chemical. All right, so I'm going to go over some of our chemical options, particularly at our delayed dormant timing. So we're getting into this timing this year. And then as well as within season options. So what can we do if, especially if we miss that delayed dormant timing, or if we're still seeing problems, can we solve them during the season? All right, and then future options. I've talked about mating disruption many times. We're actually getting into a point where these products are becoming labeled. All right, so it's a future option, but it's actually going to become a current option, but we're just not quite there yet. All right, so delayed dormant. All right, so our biggest defense or our first line of attack against San Jose scale are using our horticultural oils, and this has not changed, right? I still will recommend using these horticultural oils at least twice a season during that dormant and delayed dormant timing. It's really critical to get a good coverage. And so a few years ago, we did a project looking at how can we improve that coverage. So we're using our 1.5% oil per acre, looking at 2 different timings, our pre-pruning and our post-pruning. Because I know when you're getting busy, you might not always get an application out before you pruned. You might have to come back and get it after you're post-pruned, seeing which timing is going to be better. And then what volume, all right? So we have our standard 100 gallons per acre, and we double that to 200 gallons per acre, and then just went extreme with 400 gallons per acre, right? I know this is insane. I don't ever recommend doing it, but science, we got to see what's going on. All right, so just to show you what we did, we had our pre-pruned trees. We have all those extra limbs and stems there that just kind of extra things to cover. And then our post-prune, we got all that out of the way. We put out water-sensitive cards to see what kind of coverage we got. Went out and sprayed them just to show you lots of coverage here. Some areas in these pre-pruned trees we're not getting as good coverage. And the reason I'm looking at this coverage is that San Jose scale, under those waxy layers, when you're using that oil, it's actually covering that whole thing and suffocating them. So we really need good coverage in order to kill the scale. It's not an insecticide in terms of killing them with a poison. It's a purely physical suffocation of those scale. When I say it that way, it sounds pretty intense and scary, but we need that coverage, right? So more coverage equals better. All right, so when we look at those coverage of those cards specifically, we see that with that 100 and 200 gallons, 100 gallons with those pre-pruned trees, so those red bars here, we're only getting about 51% coverage to overall looking at all those cards together. All right, so about half of that. If you're using an insecticide, that's really good. That's actually probably more than we need, but with that coverage, that seems really low. If we go up to 200 gallons per acre with that pre-pruned, we're getting over 20, almost 30% higher coverage just by removing those extra limbs. And looking at our post-pruned trees, we're still seeing that increase both with our post-pruned at 100 and 200 gallons. And at 400 gallons per acre, actually it's not statistically better than our 200 gallons per acre, which is good, right? So that's really extreme. We don't need to go there because it's no better than 200 gallons per acre. All right, so but what we're really interested in are those San Jose scale. This is one of our tapes that we use to trap those crawlers. So all these little tiny little yellow dots here are those crawlers stuck on that tape. We bring those tapes back, count them to see how many crawlers are on there. And this is where we get. All right, so if we remember from that 100 gallons per acre with those pre-pruned trees, we had about 51% coverage. 51% coverage was not doing it. We're not getting enough control of those San Jose scale. We're getting crawlers produced, and we get a significantly higher number of crawlers on those trees, as opposed to our post-prune trees at 100 gallons per acre. We got about 77% coverage there. That significantly reduced the number of crawlers. At 200 gallons per acre, we're not actually seeing any difference between those post-pruned and pre-pruned trees. All right, so that's good. We're getting high coverage and good control. But the key takeaway here is that if you are applying the oil to a pre-pruned tree, 100 gallons is not going to get the good coverage, right? We need to up that gallonage. You might not be able to make it all the way up to 200 gallons per acre, but if you can increase that gallonage, the more gallonage you get, the better coverage you'll get and the better control you'll get. Now, if you have post-pruned trees, at the post-pruned tree, you can reduce that back down to 100 gallons per acre. 100 gallons per acre on a post-pruned tree is still getting good coverage and good control of those scale. All right, that is just using oil. If we want to improve our management with that oil, we can include an insecticide as well. All right, so we still have our chlorpyrifos, and these are small trials using 100 gallons per acre. All right, looking at those scale the same, we're still using those little traps. And sadly, this is what we start to see a lot. All these little yellow dots are those crawlers, right? I'd love to see this, but sadly, in many years, we see that. All right, so how can we stop it from looking like that? Adding in those extra insecticides. Here are a list of ones that I think are very good. We have consistent results that are efficacious against managing those San Jose scale. All right, so we have these are mainly our two controls, right? The untreated control on top where we do nothing. Our dam oil at 1.5% at 100 gallons per acre, which I just got done telling you is not very good, but we're using this as our control to see how we can improve that. I talked about increasing our volume, but can we also increase our rate of oil? And then looking at Tri-Check, which is a more highly refined oil. And then these are our insecticides. So we have chlorpyrifos, Centaur, Esteem, Carbaryl, and Venerate. And just to show you, all those are significantly better than doing nothing. And if you add in the Venerate with the oil, it's better than doing nothing as well. So it's really important, especially with that Venerate, incorporate with that oil. And another takeaway here is that these are all without the oil, okay? So nothing's down to zero, which is sad. I would love to see zeros across the board here. But the point is we can use these, add them with that oil, and get considerable better results in managing those scale, all right? So Lohr's Band, Centaur, Esteem, and Carbaryl all do a very good job on their own. So mixing those in with our oil sprays will even improve that much more. All right, so within season, So I don't necessarily think we need to use in-season sprays all the time for San Jose scale, but in hot spots or in areas where we were not able to get those delayed dormant applications out, we do have options to help knock those scale back down. Here we have our untreated control again, and then comparing to our dam oil at the delayed dormant. So this is not a within-season application, but just to give us something to compare it to. Then we have our probably the three best options for within-season sprays. We have our Movento, Esteem again, and then Brigade. All right, so bifenthrin is a relatively new product labeled for peaches. It's not new in the realm of agriculture, but new for peaches. And thankfully, it also is quite effective against San Jose scale. And then at the end here, we have within-season applications of oil. All right, so this is a low rate, about 0.5% oil, so only about a half a gallon of oil per acre. But this is applied at 6 applications starting in late May. Apply those on every 7 to 10 days, getting that consistent application of oil to help suppress the populations. All right, and there's stars here. Adding in an oil during your within-season sprays, it does risk phytotoxicity, especially when you're mixing that with Captan. We've done several studies showing that at low rates of Captan and low rates of oil, it is safe, but there is that risk. I did one season where I added too much Captan and just burned the crap out of my trees. So I have to say, just beware. Low is good, right? But with this, you have to do lots of applications of that oil. All right, but when we look at that all together, all right, we have our untreated control, our dam oil there, and then everything else is significantly lower. Our Movento, Esteem, and Brigade all work really well for suppressing those scale within season. And then that dam oil as well, with that one caveat that you could also burn your leaves and fruit. All right, now, one thing I've been working on, and this is another caveat to this one, is that it's still in progress. I've been presenting on this for years, but we're still trying to make it better, is trying to refine that phenology model, right? Our best and most effective timing for killing San Jose scale outside of our delayed dormant with the oils is targeting those crawlers. The crawlers are the most vulnerable stage of San Jose scale. They're just these little blobs. Almost everything kills them. However, they're only active for about 1 to 3 days, depending on the temperature or where they can find a place to settle. And so if you have only a window of 1 to 3 days, it's really hard to target those crawlers, which is why things like Movento, which is a systemic, work well because it doesn't matter if you're targeting the crawlers or not, you can still kill them. But if we can target those crawlers, we're just going to be that much better. All right, so there's an old model that's using the male activity, so capturing the males on a pheromone-baited trap. So here we got our pheromone-baited trap. The males stick to that. And once you start collecting those, you can use that to target your crawlers by using their development threshold. So using the growing degree days, you can calculate with 51 degrees in the lower threshold and 90 degrees upper threshold, calculating 90 at the upper threshold, which early in the season doesn't really matter, but just keeping that consistent with that 51 and 90, you can then calculate the growing degree days. So once you catch the males on these traps, you initiate the growing degree day counts. And at 600 degree days after capturing the males on those cards is when you would initiate your sprays to target those crawlers. All right, the problem with this is you have to actually put these traps out. You actually have to monitor them to make sure you're getting these scale on those cards. And they're also very tiny, which adds a whole nother level to that. So can we develop a model that's not using those traps, and we can actually just predict them based on activity of the crawlers? All right, so you don't have to look at this and measure everything. I'm just showing you the activity of the crawlers over a period of years, just showing how different every year can be. All right, we can have had extreme years and typical years. But if we take all that data and look at it, we can say, yeah, there's periods of activity where we have peaks. Right? In Georgia and South Carolina, especially along the ridge in middle Georgia, you can find crawlers almost all year round, which is just insane. But if it's a warm day, you might find one just roaming around looking for a place to settle down. Whereas up in, even in the upstate or up in Michigan and New York, it's just too cold. We don't have those warm days. They're not active. And so it's a lot easier to time up there. But here, we're looking at these main peaks of activity. All right, so if we're targeting those main peaks, we can get the most bang for our buck when it comes to insecticides. When we plot those, we can actually determine a little model here to show when, during those periods of peak activity based on growing degree days, we see those 3 peaks here. And what it comes down to is it will help us decide when to manage those. So about 690 degree days, and this is just an arbitrary number that seemed to work out the best, February 1st. So we can start February 1st, counting those growing degree days. About 690 gets our first peak here. 2,500 gets our second little peak. And then our last one is 4,100. And I put this star here to say let's target that first peak is going to be our best bet, because when we get later on, we start to get overlapping generations. We don't get that really nice distinctive peak, and it just becomes harder to target the crawler. So if we can get them early on, hopefully we can cut out all those other peaks. All right, so can we develop a model without a trap? Possibly. It's not perfect, but it does seem to work pretty well, especially with that first peak. So our tentative model, still using those development thresholds, 51 and 90, accumulating degree days after February 1st, get the 690, 2,500, and 4,100 are pretty accurate for targeting those peak activities. And then if you're using that model, then manage the scale accordingly. Again, you don't have to manage scale necessarily on all acres, but if you're monitoring those fields and you're seeing if there's hot spots, using those degree days can help stop them. But we're still working on refining this. I'm on a grant right now with multiple states trying to bring all our data together to really get a really good model that's effective throughout the peach growing regions. All right, and just to show, we did test this a couple years ago. This was a typical year, 2021. We target that first peak here, and you see that we didn't manage everything, but we did get a significant reduction when we applied a steam at that first peak. We get a little peak here, but everything is much lower. So it does seem to work, but we'll keep you abreast as changes come. All right, our last section is the mating disruption. Just want to quickly talk about how mating disruption works. Ted is going to go into a little bit more detail because mating disruption works for a variety of different insects. They're all specific pheromones. Each insect is going to produce a specific pheromone to that insect. So this one is specifically for San Jose scale. All right, so we have our peach tree, just a little during bloom, I guess. And there's our female, a little blob there. So imagine I peeled off that covering. She's exposed and produces this pheromone plume. A male with his wings here is flying around, picks up on that pheromone plume, and whoop, and finds that female. The male finds the female, they do their thing, and she produces the crawlers. All right, the crawlers then move off, find a place to settle. They mature, become new males, new females, they mate, and the cycle continues. But if we can take a synthetic pheromone and put those in our trees, the female still produces her plume, her pheromone plume, but those pheromone, if we put it, will also produce that plume. And if we put that pheromone on all the trees, we get this huge cloud of a pheromone or a bunch of different plumes. The male comes in, he's flying around, he cannot figure out which of those plumes is an actual female. If you imagine how tiny these guys are, it's really hard for them to fly for an extended period of time. They'll either just not find a female and give up or tire out and die. And so we're basically stopping those males from finding the females. If they can't mate, they can't reproduce, and then we don't get, went too far, don't get those crawlers. All right? So is mating disruption a viable option for San Jose scale? All right, I've been working on this for many years now. Started back in 2018. All right, we've looked at these quarter-acre plots. So small plots in these orchards, testing 2 different products, one from CBC America, which are these twist ties, very similar to the Petri borer dispensers, and also Trace, which makes these puzzle pieces. You just plop them onto a tree, really handy there. Test multiple sites in multiple years, and to evaluate this, we look at both the males, right? So these male traps are basically representing a female. We put out a pheromone-baited trap, and then if a male can find that trap, we basically assume that the male can also find a female. So we compare that mating disruption versus a control. Oh, went too fast again. All those little dots here are those males. So you can even just see, looking at that mating disruption versus our control, especially down here, you're getting a lot more of those males on these cards in our control situation, meaning that the males most likely are being able to find those females in our control. Well, another way we looked at it is looking at those crawlers, because if they're mating, that means they're producing crawlers. And so our data here is showing in a typical year, this is from 2021 again, and a typical year with the males, we get a significant reduction from our control with both our Isomate product and our Trace A. So this is our CBC America and the Trace A products, significant reduction in the males. All right, that's great. That means that most of those males might not be finding the females, but the most important part is looking at the crawlers. Again, the crawlers show a very similar trend here. It's actually a significant trend, a reduction with those mating disruption dispensers. We're again not seeing zeros, but with mating disruption if you use it year after year, you're expecting to see that decrease year after year as well. We're currently doing a project where we're looking at year after year so we can demonstrate that, but right now we're just showing at different sites, we still see that reduction. Now our big caveat here is that in high pressure situations, it starts to break down. The males don't have to fly very far to find a female, so if you have a lot of scale in your orchard, what we're seeing at low pressure, it works great. But as we get higher pressure, these are the scale in our untreated plots, higher pressure, it starts to break down, and we start to see a lot of reproduction and more scale. And so really what it comes down to is we have to have low pressure situations. In a low pressure situation, this is from 2024, we get really low counts in the males. And actually in 2024, we didn't find any crawlers in either of our plots that we tested with those Isomate and Trace A. But again, this is really low. We're seeing an average of 15 crawlers on those tapes in our control. But this is really exciting. And at low pressure, we can keep them low throughout the season. And in theory, if we continue this project, which we are, next year we'll also continue to see them low in those mating disruption. All right, into our summary. So that oil application is still critical. I think it is very important that we continue to use those oils, try to get them at the best rate possible. So if you're having our pre-pruned trees, increase that rate so we get better coverage. If you have post-pruned trees, you can keep that rate a little bit lower and still get that coverage and control. Delayed dormant insecticides will improve the management of those scale. We have several options that have worked really well year after year. Targeting those crawlers within this season, we don't have as many options, but the Movento, as long as you have good leaves, new leaf growth, and use a spreader sticker or an adjuvant to help get that material into the leaves, you can get really good control of scale. And then the Steam and bifenthrin, those are targeting those crawlers. So if we're using our degree day models and using those options to target the crawlers, it also works really well. And then mating disruption is a promising alternative. We haven't figured out all the issues here, but in those low to mid-range populations, you can really significantly reduce the number of crawlers, reduce that reproduction. And the most exciting part here is that Trace A has submitted their label to EPA, so they are going to bring this to production. Unfortunately, it's all in EPA's hands right now, depending on when it's going to be available, but it will come out. All right, and just a heads up, our 2025 spray guides have been printed, so they'll be available soon. They will go online a little bit later. Unfortunately, we have to get it all approved through our communications office, but it will be up there online eventually. And then if you're not part of our blog, I highly recommend it. We put out pertinent information in a timely manner. We do not spam you or blast you with unimportant information, but if you're not part of that, be a part. And then last, just I always got to put a plug in for the My IPM smartphone app. We update that every year. We updated it back in October, so we're good. All right, thanks for everyone who's made this possible, and We can hold questions if you have one. We're going to transition, but we have our what do we call, roundtable at the end. So if you have questions, please remember them and ask me during our roundtable.
As Dr. Blau mentioned, our next speaker is Dr. Ted Cottrell with USDA. Long history and career of doing work with mating disruption on multiple insect pests. But today he's going to be talking to us specifically about borers. Thank you, Dr. Cottrell.
Good morning. Thanks, everybody. Can you hear me in the back? Everybody got me? Thank you. All right, so let's get into this. I've talked about borers quite a bit, but it doesn't, over the years I've talked about it, but it doesn't hurt to go back over some of the basic biology of these pests and what they do. So we've got two species here, lesser peachtree borer and peachtree borer. They're both serious pests of peach production across the Southeast, and they do demand your attention. Both of them feed on the both species, the larvae feed on the cambium of the roots, that's the peachtree borer, and the trunks and limbs, that's the lesser peachtree borer. This feeding damage accumulates over time, and it can affect your orchard productivity and orchard longevity. You'll notice there at the bottom that the peachtree borer, the male and female, are different, but if you look at the lesser peachtree borer, those males and females are very similar in their appearance. All right, let's focus on the peachtree borer for a little bit. This one that's native to North America and occurs across North America, so it covers the entire continent. Host plants do include peach, plum, and native prunus species. The eggs are laid near the host plant. They don't have to be laid right on it. They can be laid near the trunk, and that's fine. Those eggs hatch, the larvae go down into the soil and burrow into the roots. Doesn't matter if it's healthy bark or damaged bark, they lay eggs based on the occurrence of living peach or host plants. Larval feeding of the peachtree borer, so it's going to be at soil level or below. They're highly damaging, especially to young trees. A single larva on a new tree can do a lot of damage because they will bore all around it, girdle it, and that can be a problem for a young tree. In the past, late season handgun application of chlorpyrifos, and hopefully that'll be around for a little bit, that's what we used to control it. Did a really good job. But as we know, the availability is not guaranteed. And just to show you, this is a trial we put out where we had Warhawk, which is chlorpyrifos, and Ryman, which is novaluron. So this was done in 2008. Putting this out in late September. Come back in the spring, evaluate for peachtree borer damage, and both of those at those rates, now that's a high rate of Ryman, but both of them do an excellent job. Just knock out peachtree borer. Now let's do this test later, 5 years later in 2013. Same setup, got some extra treatments in there, but we're not getting the same kind of control out of chlorpyrifos, Ryman, or even venom, or even the combination. So why not? What's going on? Are we getting resistance? No, not resistance. What we're finding out is that peachtree borer biology, not biology, but its reaction to the changes in pesticides being applied to peach, it's changing also. So there, that blue square late in the season, this is where we typically applied chlorpyrifos for peachtree borer control. Did a great job. Why did we apply it here? Because that's when it was active. But you can see it's active all season now. When we were applying methylparathon as a cover spray for plum curculio, this did not exist. This now exists. If you only listen to one thing I say today, it's that peachtree borer is active all season. This won't cut it anymore. So with peachtree borer control with insecticides, air blast applications aren't the best approach for controlling peachtree borer. If you're going to control it with chlorpyrifos or even Ryman, novaluron, you need a drench application applied to the trunk. The entire circumference of the trunk must be treated. You can't treat half the tree and leave the other half untreated. It won't work. You need to apply an adequate rate of the product. And you're going to need more than one application per season. That one late season application will not control peach tree borer anymore. One of the things we've been working on, this is something I started with Tom Beckman years ago, and we're continuing it with Brett now, is we're looking at possible, with Brett and also with Dario, I should say, we're looking at possible resistance to peach tree borer. In this field trial that Tom had set up, I went in and started sampling for peach tree borer. Peach tree borer was more prevalent attacking peach than on the plum. Peach tree borer does not prefer plum over peach. So if you've got peach and plum together, it's going to go for the peach more than it will plum. Maybe we can use that in its with some of Tom's rootstocks and what Jekin's going to be doing in the future, and even Dario, and come up with some resistant germplasm to peach tree borer, hopefully. So let's move to lesser peach tree borer. This one occurs across eastern North America. It does not occur west of the Rocky Mountains. So its host, like the peach tree borer, includes the peach, plum, native prunus species. That's going to be like black cherry and Chickasaw plum. It will attack those. About 3 generations per year across the southeast. The moths fly from March through mid-November. So it's active all year. Always has been. The females lay eggs on broken bark. Fresh broken bark is what they prefer. It doesn't matter what causes the wound, they're going to be attracted to it because the fresh broken bark is releasing volatiles that the female is attracted to. So if you break the bark, they come to it and they will lay their eggs. Now, lesser peach tree borer eggs do not stick to the host plant, so they need rough bark, broken bark to put their eggs on. Smooth, undamaged bark, it's not an egg-laying site because if they lay the eggs on it, they'll just fall off. All right, so if we look at preference for lesser peach tree borer to lay their eggs, we did a little study where we went out in the field. We had Chickasaw plum, peach, black cherry. We wounded the limbs on the tree, came back 24 hours, cut the limbs, took them to the lab. We wrapped the cut ends of the limbs with parafilm so the volatiles wouldn't come out from the cut ends. And then we wrapped the treatments in cheesecloths just so they look visually similar. And this is what the treatments look like. So that's what the lesser peach tree borer in the colony were seeing. And so what we find is that peach is highly preferred for lesser peach tree borer than either Chickasaw plum or black cherry. So there is preference here. Peach is highly attractive to both of these borer species. All right, so what about within peach? So we did a study where we're using Gala, flame prints, and red globe. We set it up similarly. Instead of pounding the bark with a hammer, we just cut it with a knife to release those volatiles. What we find is they don't care which cultivar peaches it is, as long as it's peach, they're going to lay their eggs on it. So it's going to be very hard for us to find any innate resistance in peach germplasm for resistance to lesser peach tree borer. All right, so if you're going to management with insecticides, which is difficult, here's some of the things to consider. The larvae feed internally. It's hard to control when you're applying the insecticides externally. Once they get under the cover of the bark, game over. You're not going to control them with insecticides. Results with many products. I've tested just about everything out there. They're highly variable results between experiments. One experiment it looks good, the next it does not. It's unlikely that the orchard cover sprays for plum curculio will be applied at the optimum time for maximum control of the larvae before they tunnel into the bark. And that's why if you're applying insecticides against lesser peach tree borer, you need something with high residual activity. And overall, from what I've seen, all the tests I've done, chlorpyrifos is best. But again, how long will it be available? And if it's not available and you're going with an insecticide, Ryman is something that's likely the next best choice. Now, granted, with bifenthrin getting the label, I have not tried bifenthrin against the borers. I suspect it would be pretty good. I don't know, but I just suspect. All right, so actually the topic of my talk, mating disruption, right? But it's good to go over some of this basic biology and some of what we know about the borers. So what can mating disruption provide for peach? Brett went over, gave a very good introduction for what it can provide for the scale insects and how it works. And it's a very similar situation here. What we're doing here, we're putting out a product that's going to provide control of both peach tree borer and lesser peach tree borer. One application, two pests. It's single manual application, lasts single season long. So we're going to put this out early spring, and that's it. Put it out at the correct density, and that's it. So that was the only product that we had available at the time, but now Trace Incorporated, they now have a potential competing product that lasts season long as well. I'm going to show some data for both of these products. We know that mating disruption has shown positive results when used in Georgia in an area-wide approach. I'm not going to go over that data again. I've shown it before, but we do get positive results using mating disruption in Georgia. Possible problems with mating disruption, product cost. But if you consider that you're controlling two pests with one application, then maybe that cost isn't too terribly bad. The efficacy of treating small orchards. What's around that orchard? You've got to be separated, and I'll go over that. You've got to be separated from other sources of infestation. Mated females flying into a mating disruption orchard are a problem. So Brett went over this, so here's my little diagram of how it works. If you got a female, she's putting out a pheromone. As that pheromone goes downwind, it becomes more dilute, so the male follows it upstream to a more concentrated source. Hopefully that's where the female is. But if we put out these dispensers, as shown on the tree here, these twist tie dispensers, they are each releasing the pheromone. So they are imitating, per se, a female releasing the pheromone too. So if you have all those dispensers releasing pheromone, then the male's not going to be able to find the female. Now, the thing about it is, what can be a problem is all of these openings. If you have skips in your orchard, the size of these openings, if you get the female in those openings and the males can find her in there, then that can be a problem. The bigger these skips, the more likely that males are going to find females. So that's why putting out the correct rate of this pheromone is very important. If you start reducing the rate, you're going to increase the size of these gaps, and you're going to allow the males to find the females, and it's just going to mess up the whole system. All right, so the Georgia approach is that we're going to treat everything. It's a different system than Alabama, which I'll speak about in just a little bit. But in Georgia here, so this is over 20 square miles, and we treated every peach tree in this 20 square miles. That was over 1,000 acres of peaches, right at 1,000 acres of peaches. And we did that for 3 years. This works great against lesser peach tree borer. So we're getting rid of, so males here aren't going to be able to, or females here aren't going to be able to fly over there because everything's treated. We know that peach is a more attractive host. So if there are mated females coming from the woods, very few of them, because they prefer to lay eggs on on peach than cherry and plum. So this worked. 3 years, works great. It's good against peach tree borer. The reason it's only good against peach tree borer has to do with the oviposition activity. Females will lay eggs on peach. Mated female comes out of the woods, she can dump 300 eggs in an orchard. Doesn't matter whether the trees are damaged or not. Mated female lesser peach tree borer comes out of the woods, she's got to have broken bark to lay her eggs on. And if you've kept lesser peach tree borer damage down, she's not going to have wounds to lay her eggs on. So it's really, really good against lesser peach tree borer, and it's good against peach tree borer. Now, in Alabama, it's a very different situation. We have a lot of growers, very small orchards, and a lot of these orchards are widely separated. So taking all of that into account, if we treat those small orchards, can it work? Can we get the separation so those mated females aren't making it into these orchards? So this is where I want to go over some of the study I've done in Alabama. So this is all done in central Alabama. We're using replicated orchards, mating disruption orchards, and control orchards. The products we're using were the Isomate LPTB Plus. That's the product that has been formulated to last season long. So those are the twist eye dispensers, and we put those out at 150 ties per acre. It's very important that you hit that mark of 150 ties per acre. The Trace A PTB meso strips that we put out, these are larger strips, and we're only putting those out at 32 strips per acre. Different product. So that's 32 per acre of those. All right, so we're going in and we're measuring or capturing males and traps, pheromone traps, to see if we're getting trap shut down, to see if we've got good coverage of the orchard with the mating disruption product. And so we monitor these traps weekly, March through October. With lesser Petri board, we're going in, we're monitoring if we're getting reproduction. So we're looking to see if existing wounds continue to produce lesser Petri board. All right, so with regard to Petri board, this is what we're seeing. So this is our control. These are the control traps, the Isomate and the Trace A traps, no captures. You've got it knocked down. So both of those products, we can get that pheromone out across the orchard. That's very good. But let me know, just notice, look at this is Petri board. Look how early that's coming out. We're getting Petri borer in April. So your late September, your August, September handgun applications are going to do nothing against Petri borer coming out in April. All right, so that's in 21. So we repeated the study, did it for 2 years. In 22, we're seeing very similar things. We're shutting down trap capture of males in pheromone traps with the Isomate and the Trace A products. Now we move to lesser Petri borer. We've got higher densities of those, but we're seeing the same trend. We're shutting down the trap capture with Isomate and the Trace A product. Lots of captures in the controls. And then we do it in 2022, we're seeing the same thing. All right, so what's that mean? Trap capture, this data makes really nice graphs. It looks really good. You get some contrast in there between your treatments and your controls. But it means nothing. It means nothing. It's a red herring. The only thing that matters is reproduction. So this is what we want to look at. Are we reducing the rate at which the pest is reproducing in the orchard? And with these products, we were. This is the control. This is a number of pupae that we're seeing on these limbs emerging across the season. And then here it is for the 2 treatments we're putting out. It remains low. Starts a little bit high and then goes lower because they're not reproducing. In 22, we're seeing the same thing. We're getting a reduction in reproduction in these orchards. So what can we say about mating disruption? It can be effective. If it's used correctly, if you put it out at the correct rate and use it over time, it's going to work for you. Orchards must be isolated from non-treated orchards serving as a pest source. So you've got to have some distance so those mated females can't fly into the neighboring orchard that's been treated. It's not perfect. High pest populations, as Brett was saying with San Jose scale, same thing here. High pest populations take time to bring down, and it may need an insecticide assist to bring it down to keep the mating disruption working effectively. And with that, if there are any questions, I'd be glad to take them.
How far can they fly? Like, what would be considered a neighboring
How far can the moths fly? Very good question. It's not just how far they can fly, it's what are the obstacles in between. So if you had a quarter mile and you had woods between them, that would be sufficient. If it was open, I want to see more than a half mile, maybe a mile. These are day-flying moths that are strong flyers. They can move. They can move. Yes?
With all the different mating disruptions, different pheromones, is there a possibility that they can cancel each other out or
Are you talking about with San Jose scale and borers?
Yeah.
No, the chemistry's too different. That's not an issue. All right, thank you. I appreciate your time.
That's my before you. Thank you. Appreciate you. Appreciate it. Not from me. Borers are such a significant pest. And I appreciate both of the two last speakers and work we've been able to do on farm. Unlike other pests, it's killing the entire tree, not just the fruit, not just affecting the fruit. Next, we have Dr. Shapiro, also with USDA, working on beneficial nematodes and helping to control borers. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Andy. So I'll be talking about peachy borer, lesser peachy borer also, but another tool that can be used are these beneficial nematodes. I want to acknowledge my co-investigators, Brett, Keith, and David. Brett, you heard from David and Keith are working on the borers at Michigan State on a project we have together right now. So I'll be giving you a little bit of background on these nematodes and then talk about if you have borers that are above ground, the lesser peachy borer, and then below ground, the peachy borer. And then some of the new stuff we're looking at to improve this approach. So the entomopathogenic nematodes, also known as beneficial nematodes or abbreviated EPNs, these should not be confused with the harmful nematodes that attack peaches, the plant parasitic nematodes. These nematodes, these little worms, only kill insects and they don't harm humans or other non-targets. We can think of really two kinds of these nematodes, or two genera, or they're Steinonema and Heterabdidids, and they've been around a while. We have a number of them that are commercialized. Basically, the nematodes, they kill an insect by going into the natural openings or sometimes the cuticle. The nematodes will then release a partner, a symbiotic bacteria, and that's really a fascinating part of the biology, that they have this partner where the nematodes and their bacteria work together to kill that insect pest, and both of them, the bacteria and nematodes, proliferate inside that insect, and then you're going to get tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of new nematodes being released, and they're able then to find new insects to attack. So the Heterabdidids differ from the Steinenematids, and Heterabdidids have hermaphrodites in the life cycle, but Steinenematids don't. So some of the benefits of these nematodes, they kill a lot of different kinds of pests relatively quickly, at least compared to other insect diseases like fungal diseases or viruses that attack insects. These nematodes kill quickly. They have a durable infective stage, we call it infective juvenile, or IJ, that makes them amenable to mass production and application. They're extremely safe to humans and other non-targets, so much so that they don't require pesticide registration in the U.S. And as I mentioned, there are a number of commercialized species, about a dozen, but it is important to know which is the best nematode to use against the target pest that you're trying to kill, because they have more killing ability, one nematode versus another, against different pests. They're applied using most standard agricultural equipment, so they can go through standard sprayers as well as irrigation systems. And they're used to control a wide variety of economically important pests, some of those showing here, like citrus weevil, black vine weevil, and so on. So looking at the above ground borers, we got introductions on lesser Petri borer from Brett and Ted, so I won't spend a lot of time. We know that these occur, the pest attacks the scaffold limbs and the trunk. The nematodes, these beneficial nematodes, are really sensitive to UV radiation and desiccation. So if you just apply the nematodes to a wound like this that has the lesser Petri borer inside, the nematodes will get hammered by UV radiation, or they'll dry out and they'll die. So we had to develop protective mechanisms to help those nematodes in that situation. So we looked at a variety of approaches, and we looked at the nematodes applied by themselves, and then putting a diaper around where the nematodes were applied. That was Ted's idea. Ted did a lot of work with us in the beginning. I think one of his kids was a baby at home at that time, and he thought diapers stay wet a long time. Just proof of concept, we wouldn't recommend putting diapers all over the field, but it does keep the wound wet. We looked at paint, and then also a sprayable gel, which is barricade, a fire gel, looks like that. It's usually used to control wildfire, in your houses or other structures. We thought it would protect the nematodes, keep them moist, and protect them from UV, which it did. So the W is just water controls, N is for nematodes. So nematodes only, this is percent live lesser Petri borer. So the nematodes fail without any protection, but with the barricade, we killed all of the insects. The diaper did pretty well, but not as well as the barricade. So we see this gel can really help the nematodes survive above ground. And you don't have to apply it in that thick manner that you saw in the previous slide. You can reduce the amount of gel to only 2%. So we have here 2% barricade or less, and you're still getting a high level of control. This is percent live lesser Petri borer. And you can see that that level of control is similar to the full rate of barricade, and also this level of control is equal to chlorpyrifos. Again, if you don't have this is SC nematode, Steinonema carpocapsae, which is the one we use for all of our applications. We found it's the best one. If it doesn't have any protection for the formulation, then it does very poorly. So moving on now to the below ground borers, Petri borer, as said previously, it's attacking below ground into the roots. Mating disruption, as we just heard, is a good option. The nematodes are also extremely capable of killing this pest very, very well. The nematodes, interestingly, can kill both early and late season larvae. So what Ted was talking about, where if you put the chlorpyrifos only at the end of your season, it's not getting those insects that were attacking earlier. Well, the nematodes can clean up what's already inside. They'll go into the roots and kill the insect. And for that reason, they can also kill both early and late in the season, even into the spring. In terms of preventative control, this is just one example where we have this SC nematode, S. carpocapsae, 2 different strains doing just as well as chlorpyrifos. And you can apply these nematodes using any mechanism that you're already using to apply your chemicals. So you can also say, as I said, apply these in the spring as a curative control. So if you haven't killed all the Petri borer in the summer and fall, you can clean up what's left over in the spring, early spring, as soon as the temperatures are warm enough for the nematodes to be active, about 70 degrees or above in the soil. And you can see that the nematodes apply, this is chlorpyrifos. Once it's this late, it's not controlling relative to control, but the nematodes applied with a boom sprayer, handgun, trunk sprayer, or just a watering can reduce the population, and this is in the early spring. So ideally, you're going to apply the nematodes for peach tree borer with irrigation, even if you have to do some watering. The nematodes need to remain moist, so you want the soil to be moist for at least 2 weeks after application. That's going to be the best way. If you can't keep the soil moist, you don't have irrigation, and you can't do any watering, then you can use that barricade gel on the soil as well. So you see the nematodes with barricade, EPN, entomopathogenic nematodes, did just as well as chlorpyrifos in reducing the population. Nematodes without irrigation, where they're just left to dry out in the soil, did very poorly. You see like 80% infestation. So the soil has to be moist one way or another with the gel, or preferably with irrigation. So from all of this initial research, we see the beneficial nematodes kill peach tree borer as well or better than chlorpyrifos. It is actually very economical if you're only applying around that base of the tree for the peach tree borer. And again, it needs that moist soil or the gel. We then started this project supported by SARE, looking at trying to get lower rates of the nematodes or lower the rate of barricade, looking at trying to reduce costs. And then we also wanted to see, are there secondary benefits in applying these nematodes besides just killing the target pest, which was peach tree borer. We know we have root feeding weevils in the orchard. Ted Cottrell and Dan Horton first showed that they may have economic impact. So we wanted to see, if you're trying to kill peach tree borer, will you get other benefits from applying these, such as applying the nematodes, such as reducing the root feeding weevils. So we did this in commercial orchard in Fort Valley. It was Lanes, as well as a low input organic orchard in Fayetteville. And we applied the nematodes at different rates, as well as barricade at different rates, as well as in the low input orchard, we only did nematodes versus untreated control. And then at the USDA station, we just looked at the weevils and the same kind of applications. Once again, we're always using this nematode species, which is widely available commercially. So we applied the nematodes in the fall, as well as a follow-up in the spring. We compared that full rate of barricade to just 2%. For the nematodes, we compared 1.5 million per tree to 0.5 million per tree. And then we assessed the peach tree borer in the following spring, and we looked at root weevil presence over about a year during that application period. So in that low input orchard, we see the nematodes completely controlled peach tree borer. And then for the rate test of the nematodes, we see 0.5 million per tree, did as well as 1.5. Chlorpyrifos did not do well that year. In the second year, chlorpyrifos did well, and so did both of the nematode rates, which were not different from each other. And then the rate test of the barricade, 2%, did just as well as the full rate, and same in both years. Looking at the weevil population, these root-feeding weevils, we see the nematodes did reduce the population some compared to the control, whereas the chemical, being chlorpyrifos, did not. And this is just some of the weevils that we found in that project. So compare conclusions from that project. We're seeing the nematodes continues to control peach tree borer, as well as chlorpyrifos. The lower rates of nematodes and barricade were as effective as the higher rates. So again, we think the nematodes applied can be quite economical. You're only applying around the base of the tree. And now nematodes are recommended in the Georgia Spray Guide for peach tree borer. So just some more recent stuff we did, just was trying to do more grower trials. So if you're interested in doing a grower trial so you can see for yourself, we're happy to work with you. This one was done over the past year at Pearson Farm, treating, there's not doing replicated experiments anymore because we've done that so many times, so we're just trying to treat large blocks, and then if you're willing to give us an untreated block for comparison, then great. So this is 100 trees per treatment. So we had non-treated trees, no nematodes, 10% infestation. And then I can't recommend one company of the nematodes over another. However, these are the two largest producers of the nematodes, so those are the two ones we used. And you can see they both did really well, 1% infestation and 0. So again, anybody interested in doing trials, we'd be interested to work with you. So some future research we're looking at, we have CPPM, Crop Pest Management Grant with Michigan State and UGA. We're going to be looking at lower rates, even lower than this 0.5 million, maybe 300,000 IJs. One thing we want to look at is whether these good nematodes can suppress the bad nematodes, because that's been shown in some other crops. So maybe that would be a benefit in peaches as well. We want to see if also maybe there'd be impact on fungal diseases like armillaria, because that bacteria the nematodes carry has certain antibiotics that may have an impact. And then we're going to continue looking at formulations like Barricade, because we'd like to find one that's less expensive and also may be compatible with organic. So we have some promising results from that from the lab that we're still working on. We're also doing some pheromone work. These parts that are highlighted, I'll just touch on a little more. So with this project with Michigan State and Brett at UGA, we're looking at developing and improving the tactics against the borers in peach and also cherry, doing field trials, trying to get lower rates of the nematodes, and we're also starting to look at American plum borer. There's other aspects to this project, such as screening for better chemical insecticides. So at this point, Altacor was found to be something that could be promising for the borer control at Michigan State. So in terms of looking at other ways we might protect these nematodes from UV radiation desiccation, we're looking at nanoparticles so that each nematode will get like a suit of armor to protect it. So this nematode diagram showing the nematodes with a covering of nanoparticles so that UV radiation can't penetrate and they won't desiccate. This is working with an Israeli group and is showing some good promise. Well, also, this is some results recently from Xiaowei Wu, who's in our lab. She's now at Ohio State, showing that a kaolin formulation or liquid starch does really well in protecting against UV. So this is survival of the nematodes under UV, and the kaolin and liquid starch did very well. We have, Brett has a student that we're working with, Sabrina, who's also looking at new formulations that would protect the nematodes, such as comparing with the Barricade, CMC, carboxymethylcellulose, xanthan gum, sodium alginate, locust bean gum, and the locust bean gum and sodium alginate showing very promising results in terms of protecting the nematodes. So we talked quite a bit about pheromones in the last two talks. Well, nematodes have pheromones too. That's how they talk to each other. So the nematodes will tell each other to stay together in groups so they can help kill an insect together, and they're going to tell each other when it's time to go out and find an insect and kill it. So we want to use these pheromones, or we are using these pheromones, to direct their behavior so that we could be the ones to tell the nematodes, now it's time to go out to find an insect to kill it. So we expose the nematodes to their own pheromones before applying them in the field, and that kind of turns them on and makes them more active. And we showed this recently against pecan weevil, where you see this is % survival of the pecan weevil. Now, pecan weevil larvae are not so susceptible to the nematodes, whereas the adults are. So this was a difficult target It was also done in December when it's kind of too cold for the nematodes. So you had great survival in the control. The nematodes by themselves, this was species S. feltii, didn't separate from the control, but the pheromones with the nematodes did. So we see the pheromones can enhance activity of the nematodes, so we want to look at that in the peach system against the borers, Petri borer and lesser Petri borer as well. So I want to thank all those providing technical assistance, our many co-investigators and grower cooperators, funding, and Guido and Andy as well. These are just some new books on nematodes that we have that are out in case you're interested. And if there's time, I'll take questions. Otherwise, I know we have the roundtable coming up.
There's plenty of time. You're actually ahead of time. Ted finished a little early as well. So, any questions?
Yeah.
Like those northern states where they get snow cover, you know, I wonder if that would be a nice protection to keep things, you know, in the ground. Does that work?
Yeah. So we know the question on snow cover would maybe help the nematode persistence. I would say it's possible. Looking at nematode, and plus, well, the freezing is not great for the nematodes, but they will survive. They'll go deeper in the soil. You know, they like to be in refrigeration, like, you know, 50 degrees Fahrenheit's perfect. They'll just stay for, they could stay for many, many months or a year or longer under those temperatures. We are very interested in persistence. In the pecan system, we have seen, at least in Oklahoma, we applied the nematodes 1 year, and then we see that they're still there the second year and get a good level of control. So we want to look at that in the peach system as well, whether we can get carryover from 1 year to the next. Yeah.
How long can the nematodes survive in the fire gel?
How long can they survive what? Sorry. In the fire gel? So you're either applying the nematodes in the fire gel on top, or you're going to mix the fire gel in the tank at a lower rate, which is going to be better because you're using less of the fire gel. And the nematodes, you know, once you're applying them on the tree, you know, if you don't have any protection, they're only probably lasting, I would say, an hour or less. With the fire gel, we haven't measured it, but the fire gel will still stay there for a few days until it starts sloughing off. But what we know is that if you apply them in that manner, they're surviving long enough to get into those lesser Petri borer wounds and kill the insects. So that's long enough anyway, but we haven't measured exactly. Any other questions? Yeah.
I may have missed this, but have you ever put it through drip irrigation for soil application?
There's been mixed results in that, that some people think that the nematodes will settle with the drip, but if you try and get a little more pressure through it one way or another, or maybe have maybe an emitter at the end or something that'll pull them through, that's going to be better. So in some cases, they have had success with the drip, and others less so. But drip is still good just for keeping the soil moist. If you're applying them by handgun or otherwise, that's something we could look at really, I think, in peach, as if drip would work well for the nematode applications. In the back. Do you remember, Brett? I think it was the 4E, the one you showed that's not labeled now. Yeah. What's that? It would have been a liquid. Yeah.
Also, regarding the positive nematodes, are you seeing any plant issues or health effects with nematodes? Or is that not?
We didn't review that here, just because it's, it's really well established that they're completely adapted only to kill insects, so they don't have any negative effects on plants. We do have a project, and there is evidence that the nematodes can cause positive impact on the plants, what SAR effect, which is systemic acquired resistance. So the nematodes, when the plant senses their presence, that certain immune response is enacted, and that gives protection against certain insects or plant diseases. So we're looking at that response. Also, insect-killing fungi appears to have a similar kind of immune response-inducing capability in the plant. So if anything, we're seeing positive impact on the plant from these applications.
Around, that way you can hear them, if that's okay with y'all. Is that all right? And then we'll just maybe share that one, if that's all right. Any who wants to share experiences with different pests on y'all's farms that you're dealing with? I know nobody wants to talk, but if somebody, it's going to be a real long section.
I'll just make a comment on scale. We have been very diligent doing the 2 applications of oil, and last year we decided to do one oil dormant and then try to use Movento in season, and the Movento failed. I mean, we saw scale on every single variety. And so don't discount the oils. So we will be doing 2 oils this year because we just did not get good control. I mean, we had good leaf flush. I mean, it seemed like the right timing, but, trying to cover a lot of acres, we were not successful. So
Any particular variety y'all were having that on? Was it late season or
we saw it on the very first variety all the way to the end. And so obviously the later you get, after July prints, it gets really bad. I don't remember. I don't know that Esteem has a label in South Carolina. It does in Georgia.
in coverage too, right? All right, other experiences? Okay.
Well, it's just a question. How reliable, we're spraying based on degree days and emergence. And now the first one is relatively reliable.
Yes.
For scale, excuse me. I think it's 3,200 hours is the August emergence for us. Is that reliable?
I don't think so. I would like to say yes, but in reality, I'm really not sure. It's just, when you get that late in the season with all the overlapping generations, I think if you're going to kill scale, I just don't know if it's going to be a real peak. You're going to kill some, but you're going to miss a lot as well. It's that late in the season is just it's been so hard to predict. I'm hoping when we include other states in this project that we can maybe shorten that and get a better prediction, but right now I'm still up in the air on that one.
And what is I missed that. I missed your talk. I apologize, Brett. What is the standard rate of oil?
For the
Dormant oil.
dormant application. Well, if it's dormant, you can go 3 or 4%. If that delayed dormant, about 1.5.
Yeah, but what is the recommend? It's 3 to 4, 3 or 4. It's a big number, whether it's 3 or 4.
Well, I know. So either at the completely dormant, I mean, if you can, it's going to be more expensive at 4, obviously, but 3 seems to work fine. So,
I would say that.
That delayed dormant application as well.
We went for years spraying 1.5%, and we thought we were aggressive at 2%. And when we went to 3%, it had 2 applications at 3%. I'm not saying it solved the problem, but it made a huge difference, even when I cut my water down.
Oh, all right.
So I was spraying 1.5% at 200 gallons, 250 gallons an acre, and it did not do it. But 100 gallons an acre at 3% does a way better job for me.
Yeah,
What-
you can increase that rate. That is ideal.
What about the lower span with it full dormant? I didn't think it was doing anything, but on an on-farm trial, we had significant differences. The oil, the full dormant, I didn't think it would affect because I was figuring on the chemical killing the crawling stage. So I thought it's a waste of our money to put lower span with the oil during full dormant. But then, at least what I saw that one year was very different. So
That's interesting So I have never tested Lorsban at a full dormant. Because the same reason.
With the oil, not alone now, with the
Yeah, with
oil.
oil. I have
Yeah,
never,
yeah.
I don't know if Ted, you've ever looked at that, because it just, to me, the way it works, exactly like you said, it's getting those crawlers.
Crawlers, that's what I thought too. But
But
that's why I did it, but yeah.
that's,
Interesting to look at.
Does the oil allow chemicals to penetrate that wax?
That's what I was wondering too, yeah, yeah. Once I saw the results, but at first I just did it just to see, but then it just got me interested. Any other experiences? Well, we got the you'd done some work with the nematode. Did you want to how that went as far as the Shapiro's work?
Well,
That was
the
interesting.
the
We've
nematodes
never
he's got.
tried it, so you know.
That's all his data. I'm not a scientist. I trust
So
him.
You never followed it commercially then on farm?
No, it's just been trials that he's put in. I did do the pheromones for boars,
Okay.
farm-wide, which Dr. Cottrell is
Yeah. He showed me how to do it.
incredibly successful
yeah.
on my farm. I got one more question, and I've talked with you a little bit about this, Ted. And what I have gone to, and a lot of us have gone to, is a heavy pyrethroid-based program. I think either it's there's a lot of reasons for it, but I think I'm seeing some breakthroughs with curculio. Is that an application problem, or is that a chemical problem?
How many applications you put on there?
A bunch.
Are you mixing your product up?
Not really.
All bifenthrin or Vaporoid or?
Oh, yeah, mixing up pyrethroids. I changed that, but I'm not changing classes a whole lot, which scares me, but
I'm really hesitant to say that you've got resistance. I will resist saying that you're resistant, just based on the curculio population. We're not set up to breed resistance really quickly. We've got so much outcross between them. I mean, you've got some that have never treated coming off those wild clones. I think it's an application and a residual activity problem. Because if you went back with Bosnet, I think you found that you would have knocked it right out. And that's a different chemistry, I know.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's resistant at all. I would be very shocked if it was.
that makes me feel better.
But should he try to rotate it to something else, or just stick with the addressing, just to further, you know what I mean? Hate to put you on the spot, but.
If you're gonna use the pyrethroids over and over, you're gonna have to talk to Brett about scale if you're gonna use pyrethroids a lot. You're gonna really start seeing some problems if you just use the pyrethroids over and over. We flare a lot of other insects, but, the number of natural remedies that are out there that are attacking the scale, is that end or the other, we don't realize what they're doing. We start spraying something that takes them out. And then we'll start seeing these other pests be flared. And if it works great against the target pest, sometimes you don't even realize what it's doing to a secondary pest that you elevate to a primary pest level. So when you start using pyrethroids, they're great. They're absolutely great. They have great activity against a broad range of insects. Most of them have a very short residual window. All right, so you put it out, you put Vaporoid out, 48 hours later, you're not going to have much of anything out there in the orchard. It's got very short residual. Bifenthrin's an oddity with the pyrethroids. It has a long residual. I can kill stink bugs on time 10 days later.
I like it as well. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other, maybe one more experience? We're still running way ahead of time, but if anybody else wanted to share, we can finish early and go ahead. Ms. Kay Rensel has our next talk, but if the farm wants to share their experiences, I don't want to, because we are still way ahead of time, but, okay. If not, we're going to move on forward. Thank you, guys. Appreciate each of you.
Okay, just while Andy's trying to find my thumb drive to load my presentation, I will say thank you to all of the people who presented earlier. I want to remind you that those people are critical people. They reach out to the National Peach Council, sometimes for letters of support in their research that they're doing, and that's because they're doing it for you. You are what are considered stakeholders in that whole research and knowledge segment of funding that they can qualify for. So certainly we ask you to support them with their letters of support when they do reach out to you for research support and funding.
This
those-
is it, right, Kay, the Peach annual meeting.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be with you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kay Rensel, Executive Director of the National Peach Council. Despite what it says in the program, I have not switched to extension or any kind of education in terms of a new capacity. However, I will tell you, I work beyond all of you here in the room on your behalf in Washington, D.C., and I also work in education, trying to educate all kinds of individuals, whether it's members of Congress, members of the agencies in Washington, D.C., or just general consumers that I engage with. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you every year what we're doing for you. We are a very small association, trade association, working for you, and I think you'll find that some of the things we do are very beneficial. Probably the most important thing that we work on is the USDA frozen and fresh peach purchases every year. The USDA has 5 different purchasing programs that include the largest one being the school lunch and breakfast program. There's also the TFAP program, which is the emergency feeding programs. Those are the types of programs that occur when there are disasters, whether it be what happened with the hurricanes that came through this area of the country, as well as other areas, the fires in California, all of that type of thing. These are the food products that are typically used through FEMA and distributed to consumers at no cost to them. They also work with the various food banks across the country, and the various feeding programs is also purchased product for the prison systems as well as the reservation programs. So it's rather extensive. Those are the 5 major programs, and you can see by what I've presented on the screen for you that in 2024, USDA, through these programs, purchased almost 51 million pounds of peaches in both frozen and fresh peaches, and that is down about 9 million pounds from the previous year. And that particular amount of product was valued at almost $79 million. That is good for our industry, even though we saw downward trends in both the volume and the value in 2024. It's good for a number of reasons. Number one, the positive thing is it exposes people who may not have been able to purchase peaches, whether it be fresh or frozen, to peaches, and they begin to incorporate them in their diet when they are available. It's a great educational program for kids in the schools. Putting peaches, whether it's a frozen cup of peaches or a fresh peach on their plate, in their snack programs, in their take-home bags for the weekend, those types of things. The other thing that does for us is it tries to help stabilize the market conditions when there's a glutton of peaches and the prices drop so dramatically. We typically are in with USDA saying, hey, we anticipate a problem and we'd appreciate your assistance. These programs have been incredibly successful for us over the years, and here's just a little deeper dive into a history of what we've been doing. You'll see the dark brown line. Let me just see here. This line represents the frozen peaches. Frozen peaches have been a part of the program for many, many years. And then the newer peach purchases are the fresh, and you can see how they have grown. These are the pounds of peaches that USDA has purchased across all of those programs. And let me also just remind you, because this is USDA data, the government's fiscal year starts October 1 and ends on September 30th. So these are reflective of all of the USDA purchases from October 1st of 2023 through September 30th of 2024. The only thing that comes outside of that particular parameter of purchasing would be frozen deliveries of peaches, because those can be processed and frozen and then delivered throughout the year. And that's all based on the contracts that are written and issued. If we move over, this is now looking at it from a dollar value. Again, we broke it out, the frozen being the brown line and now the fresh being the blue line. So 2023 was great for us. 2024 was okay for us, but let me explain to you a little bit more about it. These programs have become incredibly, just everyone's needing assistance. As specialty crop producers, you understand how difficult it is to make that positive return for your operation at the end of the year. Every specialty crop producer across the country is facing the same thing. I don't care if it's prunes, strawberries, apples, onions. Everybody is now on USDA's door going, we need some assistance because we're not seeing the returns that we need to in the marketplace based on our input costs. So now what once was a relatively just kind of a little known but not so little known program has now become a very high demand program at USDA. And USDA keeps going, we're trying to get people off of this program. Well, yes, that's true, but in our peach industry, we have been able to validate how we remain in need of assistance of these special purchasing programs. So I just share that with you. I hope, my hope is that we'll see a different tone in 2025. We are already speaking with USDA. We've had our initial meeting with them back in the fall, and we will be meeting with them again in late January just to talk about where we are. So it's very important that we understand, you know, what you're seeing with regard to your trees, your crop, understanding the, you know, have you had adequate chill hours, what's happening in the marketplace, in world dynamics. We look at all of those things, and it helps us further justify to USDA, yes, we do need assistance. In addition to that, we're reaching out more to the food banks and the schools in an indirect manner just to try to make them aware that, hey, we've got some good things that your consumers will appreciate having in their lunches, in their dinners, on their plates, that type of thing. So it's all about awareness, it's all about availability, and you know, just making sure that we maintain an open line of communication with not only the purchasing arm at USDA, but also the end recipients of the peaches that we are hoping and really need for them to continue buying. So that's probably the biggest thing that I work on throughout the year. It also comes with a lot of meetings on the Hill with members of Congress. So if I reach out to you and say, or if you hear a plea from someone else in the state that says, hey, we need you to pick up the phone and call Senator so-and-so's office or congressional member so-and-so's office to tell them how important this is, they've already gotten some type of written communication from the National Peach Council, but sometimes it takes that push from you as the constituent. Phone calls are really easy, emails are really easy, but we always welcome you. If you want to come to Washington, D.C., we'll help you get the appointments. We'll also include you in meetings that we have scheduled as well. Okay, so that's one big thing. Let me move on to a couple of the other things that we accomplished over the year. Well, sort of. Maybe when I say the very first one of the Farm Bill, yes, we are operating under an extension. I have been working very closely along with some of my other specialty crop industries in conversation with both the House and the Senate Ag committees. We had 3 of the 4, when you look at the majority and then the minority committees on each side, that were pretty much in agreement. We just couldn't get the Senate leadership to buy off on what the priorities were for the majority of the ag community. So that's why we're still in an extension. Congressman Glenn Thompson, who is the chair of the House Ag Committee, he has been. He and I have had careers together in terms of him in public service and me in agriculture. So I have an open line there, as well as Senator Bozeman's office in the Senate and a lot of other places. So we're working on it. They understand it's a priority. We have a commitment from Congressman Scalise out of Louisiana that all we need to do, all he needs to know is, do they have the support for the things they want to bring to the floor? As soon as they've got the support and the funding figured out, it'll move forward. That being said, I don't think Farm Bill's going to move much before, well, it won't move until they cover the two big things right now that will be priorities of the incoming administration. So it's a revolving door in Washington, D.C. It's revolving from the standpoint that everybody has different priorities, and just know that your ag voice is being heard there. With regard to the annual statistical yearbook, this is something we produce every year for you. We hope it is of value. It is typically found on our website, also available through email if you just let me know. So that is out there and available for you. It is a 20-year look at what's happening in the peach industry, both here in the United States and with some limited global activity as well. As I said, with regard to Washington, D.C., I do a lot with USDA and congressional meetings, whether it's the fresh and the frozen peach purchases, talking about labor and H2A, talking about even the latest thing has been the impact of the ports and logistics and anything like that. So if there's an issue you need us to be working on, just let us know. Those are probably the two hottest ones that I work on for you. As I mentioned when I started, I get lots of requests from everybody in the research community that does research on behalf of the peach industry. Many are still sitting in this room, and we are happy to write those letters of support. Having served in the capacity where they evaluate and review all of the research proposals that come in, what they're looking for is stakeholder support and engagement. And all of you that are the producers of peaches in this room, you are the stakeholders. So it is very important that you also understand if they ask you for a letter of support, and I will tell you, they are very good about giving you a draft, that all you have to do is put it on your letterhead, put the name of your company in there and sign it at the bottom. That's what they need. And that is important for them to qualify and get a lot of the federal grants and funding that they use to help support research in specialty crops. We continue to monitor supply line issues. Those of you that may have an interest in it, of course, probably everyone has heard that the longshoremen have reached a tentative agreement that now needs to be ratified. So I have no idea what the specifics of that are. It's just semi-encouraging that all the ports won't be shutting down and impacting things from imports of fertilizer, ingredients, and those types of things for us as we move forward. When it comes to advocacy, I just wanted to share with you that one of the, I believe it was a privilege, at least I keep looking at it that way, was to testify on your behalf to the Senate Ag Committee on the inclusions of all forms of fruits and vegetables in the various feeding programs that I referenced earlier. There's been a big push for fresh-only programs, but I also recognize that not every piece of fruit that you harvest can be sold fresh. And you do need an outlet for it, and there are numerous outlets. So therefore, it's important when they fund all of these programs that they not limit it just to fresh peaches, but frozen peaches as well. it doesn't impact us here on the East Coast as much, but even the availability to have canned peaches. So I got to do that. It was interesting. I've checked it off my bucket list only because it was never there, but I did it. And so now I'm claiming that it is checked off. But it was quite an experience, and I just wanted to share with you that I had done that on your behalf and on behalf of the other specialty crops as well. And then most recently, I've been working with other specialty crop programs as well as leadership in Congress on some of the assistance programs for specialty crop producers. It is, as you well know, specialty crops are very diverse, and we do not have a unified voice in Washington, D.C. like the major Title I crops do. So while they're kind of ringing the bell going, hey, pay attention to us, we could use some assistance in dairy and, Title I crops, those types of things. We're finally organized enough now that we're trying to get some direct assistance for specialty crops. There have been some recent programs announced by USDA. The intention of the program specifically that I was working on was to do direct payments to specialty crop producers, not tied to anything else except your production. It's not quite that simple. It wasn't quite as clear-cut as we had hoped for. That was one that we were hoping for through appropriations rather than through Department of Agriculture and FSA. But nonetheless, there is something there for you to potentially apply for, and certainly we encourage you to do that. It appears with the incoming administration and the new attempt to reduce the federal budget by $2 trillion that additional funding will be sparse. I don't think we're going to see some of the things that we have seen in the last 4 years with here's a pot of money to spend on things. So we are doing our best to make sure that specialty crops and from where I stand, the peach industry, have a voice at the table saying, you all need help. And you need help because of just being able to stay in business with input costs exceeding returns to your operations. So it's an ongoing thing, but know that you've got someone at the table talking for you. As we look forward, kind of mentioned a little bit about the Farm Bill. We'll continue to engage on that. That's probably a weekly or every 10-day communication back and forth with them. With regard to USDA and congressional meetings, those will continue. I just want to tell you that Brooke Rollins, who is the Secretary of Agriculture nominee under President Trump, has by far the closest working relationship that we believe we've ever seen between a Secretary of Agriculture and the administration. So this could be very good for ag. And hopefully, during the first term of the administration, there were pros and cons. We get that, but there was also I don't want to say a soft spot, but an understanding of the need to support agriculture. So we feel that we may have just kind of that extra step in making sure that message is delivered. And just from I've not met Ms. Rollins yet. I look forward to doing that once I believe she will be confirmed. I don't believe there's any issues with that at all. And certainly if it's during peach season, I'll be reaching out to make sure that we can maybe happen to have a few fresh peaches in the bag when I walk in the door. So I always take advantage of that when it's possible. Of course, we'll continue working on industry relations. If there's things that you need us to know about, issues that impact you, we'll be working on those, especially labor. We understand, we get it. It's just trying to make sure that we got the right players at the table making the decisions. I will tell you that one of the privileges I had through 2024 was to serve for 2 years as the chair of the USDA Fruit and Vegetable Industry Advisory Committee. And we came back to USDA with a very strong recommendation on how they needed to tweak, improve, use whatever word you want, the farm labor survey. We didn't get a lot of support from USDA on that, which was sad, because we all understand as specialty crop people on the committee the role that labor expenses play in your operation. So we're still fighting for that. They have not named the next Specialty Crop Advisory Committee. If I'm so fortunate to be appointed again, I will certainly be that voice of advocacy for you on revising that labor survey to hopefully impact the AWARE rates. You can see there the Peach Statistical Yearbook that's on the calendar to continue, along with when we are requested letters of support. We'll continue to monitor those supply lines. And I'm very thrilled to be able to report to you that we are updating our National Peach Council website. If you look at it now, it's very hard to navigate, and it shouldn't be but another, I would tell you, maybe month or two, and we should have it up and running, and we'll get some information out to you that it is there. One of the things that I would like you to consider, this is something that I need to talk to the board a little bit more about. This is a labor survey that we did with another specialty crop program, commodity. We looked at production expenses, which are indicated there in the gray, and then the total H2A wages, and looked at revenue, which is the line, the brown line down across the top. This was a 3-year, well, this one happens to be 4 years, but I'm advocating that we consider a 3-year look back on peaches. And there's really only 2 things that we would need from anybody willing to participate. This would be held in confidence, as we do with all of the information, so your farm, your information would never get out there. But all we need are total acres of peaches for each of the years and your total number of H2A hours. And it would be nice if we could do this by state or by region, or we can just say, you know, depending upon who all participates. When we put this visual picture together and we hand carried this around Capitol Hill, they went, wow, we had no idea. And that's the problem that we have. We have people in Washington making decisions that don't understand the impact to all of you. So when we can hand them a visual representation and say this is supported by, I don't know, 50 peach growers across the country, 100 peach growers across the country, it delivers a very, very powerful message. And we certainly want to be able to carry this to Department of Labor as well. So as we move forward, it's a very simple spreadsheet. You can see, like I said, 2 things that we need from anyone willing to do it would be total acres of peaches each year and your total H2A hours. That's it. And then we formulate, we use the USDA data, right or wrong. If we use USDA data to calculate what your cost is per acre across the country, they cannot then refute the number. And that's a lot of reason why we use USDA data. You can say, well, hey, Kay, my costs are, it's all right. If you want to share them with me, that's fine. But understand that when we go back, if we use government data, then no one can challenge us. So that's part of the motivation behind that one. So look for some communication on this. If you're willing to participate, great. I think it would be of value to our industry to put together a visual representation like this to strengthen our message. Anybody have questions on that? No?
You'll share your contact, or you'll contact them.
I can reach out to you, or contact information, I'll have it at the end, but also it's in the program. Nothing's changed, guys. I feel like I'm talking to newer, younger people every year, so I don't know what that says for me, but that's okay. All right. With that, I just want to review what we did last year as a meeting of the membership. I'm also watching my time here very closely, and this would be kind of the start of this year's meeting of the membership. We called the meeting to order. We reviewed the minutes, and the minutes are pretty straightforward because you're looking at last year's minutes. And then reviewed the financial reports, presented the Board of Directors slate. Last year was our year to do a rotation and election of officers. So we did that, and then we adjourned only a few minutes later. So if I have a motion to accept these, I'd appreciate it. Motion from Jason. Second? Second from Henry, right? All those in favor? Aye? Okay. Anybody opposed? Okay, thank you. Just so you know, this is where we stand as a Peach Council. You can see we are not, as I indicated, a large organization. You see in the first column, December, where we are December 31st of 2024. Versus where we were a year ago, and then the dollar change and the percent change in both the assets and the liabilities and equity. I would like to publicly state that there was a member of the industry who has done a wonderful job of campaigning, if I can call it that, to increase membership support over the last year, and that's a lot of what drove our revenue by 42% over last year. And that certainly is appreciated and something that the council will be using now to continue to advocate on your behalf. So that's where we are. We are pretty sound financially. Again, we are a small organization, and that's why a lot of what we do is in collaboration with other specialty crop organizations. And then just as a matter of information, this is just generally our board serves 2 years, and you can see that the board is, our president is Jason Rogers from South Carolina. Gary Van Sickle, who was formerly from California and has since retired, now living in Texas, has continued to serve as our treasurer. Immediate past president, Sean Lennon, and then our board members at large are Huff Childs, Jeff Hopkins, Casey Jones, Tom Beaver, Mike Thurlow, and Chris Yance. So we have a good, strong representation of leadership. I invite you to express your interest either publicly or privately. If you would like to serve, I make this very easy. If you ask any of these people, I just kind of move along and reach out periodically and let you know what I'm doing. So, but the most important thing here is that they are able to provide feedback to me of issues that they might be hearing at both the state and local levels that we should be addressing. And with that, there is my contact information. None of that has changed, but you can find me all over the web if you want, and I'll be around here for the next day and a half. Appreciate the opportunity, number one, to review this with you, but more importantly, to continue to serve you in the capacity that I do. So it's a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, you are wonderful people, and I tell everybody I meet that I work for the greatest people in the world, and that's the farmers that produce the food that they get to eat. So thank you.
Do you want to take a question? Did you want to take any questions?
Yeah, I can take questions. I don't know if anybody has any.
Anybody has any? No? Okay.
Okay.
Just to say thank you
Oh.
for all you do and for last minute requests, especially from me, for the letters of support.
That's okay. I can tell you right now, just the thing that Cassandra is referencing is the Specialty Crop Research Initiative grants. They have already been submitted. They are now in the phase of what is known as industry relevancy review, where people like yourselves in the room, I used to serve in this capacity as well, we would review grants that come in to make sure that they were relevant to the needs of the industry. And that's why I spoke so highly of the need to have stakeholder letters of support. That particular review will be done the first week in February, and once the grant submissions are reviewed at that level, then they select who moves on to the next level for scientific relevancy. But understand that that first level makes sure that it's something that you, the industry, is looking to have accomplished. And those letters, I'm happy to do it. Hey, I work last minute as well, so it's great, and I'm happy to do it for you. Well, the way we've been able to accomplish it is working in collaboration. So I work a lot with other specialty crop, apples, and peaches and sweet potatoes, and now I'm just drawing an absolute blank on some of these strawberries. We also work very closely with some of the leafy greens. Anybody that's got a small organization like this, you can see the size of the organization from a financial basis is such that we couldn't support a full-time staff person. So that's where we all have to come together and say, we delegate responsibilities, and anybody that's a specialty crop, we're willing to include them in discussions. Right now, a lot of the specialty crop producers are engaged in what the next level of tax law might wind up being coming out of Washington, D.C., and I didn't even talk about that one. But, the tax laws and programs on the books are about to change or stay the same or be modified. And what are the implications to small businesses and farmers like you? Okay, you need to have a voice at the table so that they know. And that's where all of us come together. Any specialty crop, anybody that's defined as a specialty crop. Now, I don't limit myself there because I do have contacts in the corn industry and the wheat industry, but it's just that our engagement is different because there are a lot of times much larger producers where specialty crops tend to be a lot of the smaller, family-owned, regional-size businesses. And if something happens to you, it not only impacts your family, your farm, but then it goes to your community, your region within the state, and that's the difference between us and some of the Title I's. So it's really just a coalition. It's a loosely structured coalition. We all just come together and work on things collectively, whether it's labor, funding, USDA purchases, those types of things. I don't know if that was clear enough for you, but that's the way we do it. It's all in that networking and knowing who we can reach out to and who we align with. Okay. Thank you.